Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking about the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Not only my review of it, but also kind of how this film was made, the history of it, and then like where things are going forward. But we're also going to be including a bit about video games on film in general, as well as what that might evolve into because of this movie. Now, I will say this up front. Spoiler warnings. Like, I will be talking in detail about the events and activities of the Sonic the Hedgehog film, so if you haven't seen it, you probably want to go do that first before you can fully appreciate this. But I don't usually do this. I don't usually cover film on this channel, and there's a simple reason for that, which is you guys typically are a video game-based audience. That's what you guys want to talk about. That makes sense. That's what we built around. But I do have a film degree. I went to Columbia College, Chicago. I love talking about film. In fact, if you ever are interested in that, I talk about it on my podcast all the time. You know, not only films, but like the industry of films, like what's going on there, why a movie was made, why this decision happened, all that kind of stuff. I've done a few reviews over time, like when a lot of the Disney Star Wars movies were coming out after the movie would come out, I would do that. I kind of got burned out on it because Star Wars in general, just, but. And you know, I think I did one on Avengers Endgame, but aside from that, I haven't really done that much. I actually went to the extreme lengths of taking certain video games and adapting them to film. You know, I took Jurassic Park the game by Telltale. I took Back to the Future the game by Telltale and adapted them into films on this channel, Jurassic Park 1.5 and Back to the Future 4 and 5. So, you know, I don't come from nothing on this particular subject. So that said, I felt like this is an interesting moment in time. This is an interesting place to be because historically speaking, video games have never really been successful in the film realm. And because I like to talk about film and because this is a video game channel, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to kind of, in my way, marry the two. So let us begin. But we'll get to the review. If you just care about the review itself, go to the time code and you can just watch the review. You don't have to hear any backstory, but I think you might find this interesting if you like video games and movies. So how did we get here? How did we get to a point where Sonic the Hedgehog released a film in 2020 and the general consensus was, wow, it didn't suck. It wasn't amazing, but it didn't suck. So let's break that down in a few ways. Now, when it comes to Sonic specifically, we'll talk about that first. Sonic he blew up in the early 90s. Everybody knows this if you're into video games. You know, he became a massive hit when he hit the Genesis or Mega Drive with Sonic the Hedgehog 1, and his popularity skyrocketed. He ended up in multiple media as far as, like, he had cartoons. There were multiple cartoon shows over the years. The Sonic the Hedgehog animated series, the Sonic Sat-Am series, the Sonic Underground series, Sonic X, Sonic Boom. Like, he's had a lot of shows there. He actually had an anime movie. I believe this was theatrically released in Japan. Over here we got it as a DVD, but Sonic the movie, like, that was a thing. He was super popular. And in #94, there actually was a legit attempt to get a theatrically made Sonic the Hedgehog film under production. However, it never took off for X, Y, and Z reasons, but it was probably for the best because I can't imagine that would have been particularly good with the premise that was out there about a kid. You know, they kind of did you ever see Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger with the magic movie ticket? That was kind of the thing they were going for, but with a kid in a video game, and Sonic comes out of the video game after he tries playing Sonic Extreme for the Sega Saturn, which was never released anyway. Doesn't matter, that was kind of the storyline they were going for, and it didn't happen. So there was never a real, like, legit theatrical attempt with Sonic the Hedgehog. And throughout the 90s is when you started seeing more and more video game movies. You would see some that were just god-awful, you would see some that were fun, like Mortal Kombat, and you would see some that were terrible, but people like them anyway, like the Super Mario Brothers movie. But in general, video game movies have always struggled. And a lot of people ask, like, why is that? You know, especially gamers, of course, because there's so many games that we love the stories to, and we go, like, what is stopping you from mining that? There's a lot stopping there. Trust a guy who went through the film school. Video games, as much as I love them, do not really lend themselves story structurally to a film. A film has to be a very specific length. You know, I mean, obviously you have some waverance there depending on the story, but in general, it has to hit very specific moments, beats, and stuff to keep the thing going along. Video games don't. They have a very different structure. They're basically free to kind of do whatever. They don't necessarily need a story to have anything move along. In film, the basic rule is every scene should advance to the next scene. You should always be pushing the story forward. Every scene should be achieving something. In video games, if I'm playing Sonic the Hedgehog, him running down the screen is not teaching me anything other than the fact that in this frame he's fast, and in this frame he's fast, and in this frame he's fast. But there's no story being advanced there. He's just going from the beginning of the level to the end of the level. There's nothing there. And in more complex modern games, you might even think there's some games out there where you go like, oh man, like that would be a good movie, like a Metal Gear Solid. You know, that's like a great story, Adam. That should be a video game movie. That should be awesome. Metal Gear Solid, as much as I love it, while it does have great story elements, a lot of it is go over there, then go back here, then go over there, then go back here. You want to see an entire movie of fetch quests? Because that's ultimately what you get. That is not a cohesive story structure. Like I said, I edited those Back to the Future and Jurassic Park movies. Particularly Back to the Future was difficult because in the game, you have to do that. You have to get the character to go from point A to point B to get the thing, to go over here to get the thing, to go over here to get the thing. And you have to find ways to kind of cut around that so the character just kind of is able to, he has a conflict and able to resolve that conflict, but not in a way where the audience just watches a character walk across the screen and go like, man, I have to get the burrito at 7-Eleven. Okay, I got the burrito at 7-Eleven. Now I have to go over here to eat it. Now I have to go over here to digest it. Now I have to go over here to shit it out. Like you don't, that's not a movie. But it is a video game. Or could be. Just not a good one. I mean, I like that video game, but that doesn't happen in Back to the Future the game. That doesn't matter. Point is, the structures are very different. Now, the 90s movies, the aughts movies, and even the teens movies, as we're calling them, I guess now, the thing is, the generation of filmmakers that made those movies did not grow up on video games. They were just a generation of filmmakers who were given some sort of vague source material. Your Mortal Kombat, for example, was pretty much as thin as like, here's the list of characters, they have to fight for some reason, do whatever. Because the truth is, Mortal Kombat doesn't have, at least initially, didn't have a particularly deep story. It still kind of doesn't. It has lore, but not a rich story. It has a rich background. It's like saying, hey man, like, we got World War II as a backdrop, which is a super complex, story in of itself. But we're going to focus on these two guys as they went to a cafe, and one had to drink, the coffee faster than the other. That is not an interesting story, even with an amazing backdrop. And the same thing would go for something like Mortal Kombat. Great background, not individually a great story. It's basically just one guy fights another guy. Now, that's a gross oversimplification, but I think you're kind of getting my point. In general, that's how video games are. They just don't have a great story. And I'm sure you're looking at me like, dude, you're wearing the Sega hoodie. You're Sega's Bay. That is actually my official title from them. Your favorite franchise of all time is Shenmue. Are you going to really say that Shenmue couldn't be a movie? It's so long. Yeah, I'm telling you right now, Shenmue in its current form could not be a movie. The original game, Shenmue 1, it might be 3 discs long, it might take multiple hours to get through that game. You might think like, what are you talking about? Then he goes here, and then he does this, and then he does that. I'm like, no, he goes from point A back to point B, back to point A, back to point B, because it's a video game. The original Shenmue, that's got like 10 minutes tops of film-compatible story. Shenmue 2, maybe a half hour. Shenmue 3, maybe 15 minutes. There's just not much film-compatible story in there. And that's, again, how it generally is with video games. But like I said, there's a generational divide here. See, when it comes to entertainment industries, whether it's video games, whether it's movies, TV shows, music, comic books, whatever it is, when it gets introduced, the generation that it first attaches onto it, builds up a love for it and grows and evolves with it. Where the generation that was right there in front of them thinks everything about it is stupid, doesn't understand it, and tries to stop it. Comic books are harmless, but there was a time where they were perceived as like the devil. It was just like, it'll rot your brain, blah, blah, blah. You heard that argument a million times with TV, comics, music, video games, everything. It's the same one. And there's always this, let's just say the okay boomer generation. I don't mean literally the baby boomers. I know we're using that kind of facetiously, but there's always the generation before that always kind of believes that thing is stupid, they don't understand it, and they try to block it until they eventually lose. There was a time in American cinema where film was in its infancy, so much so that the generation that was kind of in power was afraid of it, and they were afraid of what it would do to corrupt society, so they wouldn't allow toilets to appear in movies until 1955. That's insane. You know, I believe it was actually Psycho that ended up doing that in 1960. It was like there was a divide there. I think 1955 is when they started to lose power, and 1960 was Psycho, I think, is when they started to push all that kind of stuff through. Thank you, Alfred Hitchcock. But films started to exist, you know, all the way back in like the early 20s. You know, the Oscars started in 1929. I think the first winner was Wings. My point is, you have generations that just don't get stuff. And when it comes to video games, we didn't really get video games until the late 70s for like practical purposes. So you have, I mean, I was born in 86. You know, I'm not that old. I'm 33. But there's only a you know, maybe like a 10-year batch of people in front of me, if that started to have a video game structure in front of them. And their structure is very different. It's all like Galaga and Pac-Man. It's not particularly complex. You don't start getting to complex video game structure until, I would argue, really the mid to late 90s. And so the generation that played those games, that understands, hey, this is how a video game story can be unfolded, hasn't really come into power yet. They're getting there. And Sonic the Hedgehog might be the first time that we've ever seen one actually play out. It's interesting. I know people will point out these other movies like Assassin's Creed and all this stuff. It's like, dude, that was a game that was made much later and they already made a movie of it. Well, the movie wasn't particularly good. And the team that made it just kind of hit the bullet points of like, he's got to look like this, he's got to be located here, blah, blah, blah. That's generally what they do. But like I said, marrying the two stories, the two concepts, those two story structures is incredibly difficult. You know, and again, I don't mean to toot my own horn here, but I did it. Look on this channel. Go watch Back to the Future 4. Play the video game, and then watch my film adaptation. And you'll see, like, it's hard, man, to take one structure and mutate it into another. And it's not always perfect, because in that case, it literally is a video game. I didn't have the advantage of being able to rewrite everything from the ground up. Doesn't matter, though. But, so the whole point is, like with comic books that took forever to be taken seriously, I believe the exact same is true of video games. Now, video games are not there. They're getting there. Sonic, we might look back on it and say that was the first video game movie to also be a real movie. Not a great movie, but a real one. Kind of, I love the first X-Men movie, but you go back and watch it and it's kind of hokey. Or the first Spider-Man movie. I love it, but I go back, it's kind of hokey. I think it'll be kind of the same with Sonic the Hedgehog down the road. Now, that said, hopefully you guys have a better sense of the history of video game films and how that could change. We'll get there, because again, that bracket is changing. People are getting older, you know, and the age range of people coming into power grew up with video games and understand the source material more. And I've been saying this for years. Video games are one big hit away from becoming the next MCU. You know, the next, because again, comics were not taken seriously, and it's only a matter of time until that source data is mined, if you will, to create that kind of universe. And this movie might have done it. We might be living in that exact moment right now. So, let's talk about it. How did Sega, of all people, well, they're not a person, but you get it, how did they end up potentially having the world's first video game universe film franchise? Well, to be honest, this wasn't their first attempt at a video game movie. Sega hasn't done much in video game films. They've mostly stayed away from it, not let their IPs at that. There was one other, House of the Dead. History likes to forget this one. And yes, I'm stupid enough to own this on Blu-ray. I love this movie for how awful it is. This is a garbage movie. Like, let's keep it completely real. But I love it because of how bad it is. It is hilariously terrible in that perfect Uwe Boll train wreck way, where it's like, oh, this is unwatchable. Oh, something weird just happened. Okay, I'll stay afloat. No, this is just, I can't. Oh, what the? Well, that's kind of funny, actually. Okay, well, no, I'm out. No, hey, that was weird. Like, that's it. The whole movie is a roller coaster of stupid. It's awesome. But this was their only other video game adaptation. And I was actually going to make a joke about, well, at least Sega finally calmed down on the nudity. They went from this to this, but then I realized, like, Sonic's nude the entire movie, and they even make a joke about that. So Sega's batting 2 for 2 on having nudity throughout all of their video game movies. Whatever. But, okay, now that we know Sega's little small history with video game films, how did Sonic happen? Well, Sonic was the logical choice if Sega was ever going to get into a video game film franchise, because the truth is, Sonic is the only character they've ever produced that has hit, let glass ceiling, busted out, and become part of the cultural, ethos where everybody knows who Sonic is. Nintendo was much better at this, where they had Mario, they had Zelda, they had obviously Link, therefore included. They had tons of these characters that people knew. And while Sega had wonderful, great video games with great video game characters, the truth is most people today just don't know who most of these characters are, but they do know who Sonic is. He was the one exception. And so if you're going to start anywhere, he's the one you got to start with. He's got to go fast to theaters. But I don't know exactly how this came to be, but at one point, Sega optioned the film rights to the character to, of all people, Sony. Now, people on this channel, I'm sure, because again, it's a video game channel, will associate Sony more with the PlayStation and a video game company. Sony is not a video game company. They are a technological conglomerate, a global one, and they have their hands in many different things. Video games happens to be what they're now mostly known for because that's what they're the best at, frankly, but they also do run a film division, Sony Pictures. Now, if you know your film studio industry stuff, or even the basics, you'll know that there's really only 5 big players left in the film industry because Fox no longer exists. They've been absorbed by Disney. So there's Disney, again, which now is Fox. There's Warner Brothers, there's Universal, there's Sony, and there's Paramount. That's it. Those are your choices. Disney's doing amazing. Universal and Warner Brothers are both doing very well. But Sony and Paramount are both dumpster fires. In fact, people don't, especially like this, because you're like, oh, you're making fun of Sony. Ugh. It's like, it has nothing to do with anything. This is just a reality. Sony as a film studio does not do well. It's just how it is. They pump out flop after flop after flop, and the only things that's really holding them in place right now is Spider-Man, which they don't own. They own the movie option to him because of an old deal from the late 90s, but Disney more or less has to prop up Sony Pictures just because of Spider-Man, single-handedly. So the goal with any of these studios is to have an ongoing franchise that you can keep putting out there that people go and see routinely. The last big one that Warner Brothers had was actually the Harry Potter franchise, and they've been looking to replace it for a long time with things like the DCU, but they didn't do a very good job of that. They've been kind of holding it together with just the occasional hit here and there, but then they also have flops like Birds of Prey. Universal has mostly been pumping out Jurassic World movies, and they have Fast and the Furious movies, and they're doing okay there, and then they're doing fine. Disney, of course, is Disney. They've got Star Wars, and they've got Pixar, and they've got Marvel. They're on top of the game. But Paramount and Sony, not so much. Sony, we just talked about. Paramount, though, they had nothing. They burned out the Transformers. Like, even the Transformers movies, all the live-action ones were garbage, and it broke my heart as a massive Transformers fan. But those movies were terrible. And after the 5th one, people finally said, I'm done. Bumblebee did okay, and I think it's getting a sequel, but now Paramount's investing heavily in the Hasbro toy universe. I think the new Power Rangers movie is going to go through them, and I think that a lot of the Hasbro stuff is being optioned over there. Just because they're like, hey, that one worked, Transformers worked, let's do another Transformers, let's do another G.I. Joe. They're rebooting that again. That's kind of what they're banking on, is just weirder, known IPs that were never really given film adaptation. Sony, on the other hand, nobody knows what they're doing. I think that they're posturing themselves for a corporate takeover by Apple, which would then forfeit the rights to Spider-Man. I've had a whole discussion in a podcast before, but I do believe that within a couple of years, probably Sony Pictures will cease to exist and will probably be a subsidiary of either Apple or Disney, or at least the Spider-Man rights will revert to Disney, and once that happens, Sony will be part of Apple. Not Sony the corporation, Sony Pictures. It's very different. But that said, Spider-Man, Sonic was originally in the hands of Sony Pictures. That's what Sega, said was fine. And when I first heard that Sony was going to make a Sonic the Hedgehog movie, multiple things went through my mind. First was, really? Like, we're going to do a live-action Sonic movie at the time that's going to come out in 2019. Does the world need that? Sonic hit his peak in, 94. It feels like a little too late here. Okay. I think I've seen this movie in my head. You know what I mean? Like, couldn't anyone not predict the plot of this movie? He's going to have to come into our world, and he's going to go through some chasing, and Robotnik's going to fight him. Like, it seemed very elementary. And then you hear, it's going to... Of course, it's a video game movie, so you have that inherent bias of, it's going to suck. But then you throw it at Sony and go, I was definitely of multiple minds on the Sony thing, because... there's that small childish part of me, and I mean childish because I admit this is ridiculous, but that small part of me that's like, really? You're going to hand Sega thing over to Sony? But not really. That's not a real factor. The two real factors, though, were Sony Pictures is known to produce crap. So I was a little worried about them having control of it. But on the positive side, like I said, I do believe the future at some point is going to give us video game movies that are good, and we're going to have functional video game universes. I think that's going to happen. Sony is in an unbelievable position to do that. Because of the 5, they're the only ones that run a video game company. You know, you look at Disney. Disney owns a ton of stuff, but they have kind of gave up on producing their own in-house video games. They license off stuff now. Warner Brothers does have WB Games, formerly known as Midway, based here in Chicago, Pride, which is no longer here, so whatever. They have them, but they're just a developer. Paramount does not produce video games. Universal did for a little bit, but I believe they no longer do. Vivendi Universal, I think, ceased to exist. Though it's possible they still have some subsidiary of something, but I think they bowed out of video games. But then you have Sony, who not only does make video games, they make video game hardware. They're the PlayStation. You know, like, they have a ton of IPs they could mine and bring right over to film production. It seemed perfect. And so even though Sonic is not one of theirs, it seemed like an interesting place to start where you could start building ties to some sort of eventual video game universe mesh-up. I don't know. But it seemed interesting because I thought, optimistically, Sony's the guys to put this in the hands of. But if you know anything about your corporate infrastructure stuff with Sony Pictures, you know that they passed on it. They had it, and then Tom Rothman, who is, I believe, the president of Fox, or no, he was the president of Fox, now he's the president of Sony Pictures, taking over for Amy Pascal. He decides, not greenlighting this. I don't get it, we're not doing it. So what happens is, because they don't actually own the character, it's not like Spider-Man where they can pass on it temporarily and then bring it back or whatever, or they can pass on Ghostbusters and bring it back because they own that whole, you know, like wholesale. In this case, he just passed on it, and because they don't own the character, they released it back to the production company, and the production company said, okay, we're free to go to any of the big studios at this point. They went to Paramount. Now, Tom Rothman is infamous in Hollywood now because he was the guy who was running Fox for years. He was the guy who ran the X-Men franchise into the ground. He was the guy who blocked an Independence Day sequel for the longest time. Granted, he might have been right about that because the sequel we got was terrible. He was the one who blocked Deadpool for years. Deadpool could not exist because he didn't get it. The second he was gone, his replacement, Jim Giannopoulos, decided, hey, all right, you know what? This makes sense to me. We're going to greenlight this. We're going to go. Deadpool ends up being one of the biggest hits of all time, along with its sequel, which, again, this guy fought vehemently against. He's also the guy that screwed up the Disney Spider-Man deal there for a little bit. Granted, they kind of found a Band-Aid workaround, but he's the guy kind of responsible for making that situation drive us all insane. And then at the same time, he's now the guy who passed on Sonic the Hedgehog. The highest grossing potential, it's soon to be probably highest grossing video game film of all time. He hands it over to Paramount, and the guy who's working at Paramount now, who greenlit it, Jim Giannopoulos, who now works over at Paramount. So interesting that this guy has taken from the other guy and just whatever. But anyway, so Paramount then had control of it. Now you have to understand something about Paramount. They don't have any tentpole franchises. Like I said, they ran Star Trek into the ground. And I know people think, what about Star Trek Picard and all stuff? That's TV stuff. It's not the same division. But the film division is in massive trouble. They have nothing. Nothing. Transformers is dead. Star Trek is dead. They needed something. So they took a risk on Sonic. That's where they were, because they were thinking about toys and video games. They didn't know what to strike for. So they took a risk. But at the same time, I can tell you, having seen this movie, they didn't take that much of a risk. Immediately, I could tell, okay, this is going to be in Power Rangers territory, like the Power Rangers movie from a few years ago. It's in that territory. They shot the whole thing in Canada, which is not a slight to Canadians, but it is a sign of a low-budget production. This was shot in Canada. Okay, a lot of low-budget productions are shot up there. Not again. It's just a reality. It's an economic reality of how it's done. It's more expensive to film in the United States than it is to film in Canada. It just is. It's not a slight against Canadians. I love Canada. I go there every year. But at the same time, it's just the truth. When you go to film, when a big Hollywood production moves up to Canada, the truth is the studio doesn't typically have much faith in it. Just how it is. So they moved the production up to Canada, and the moment I knew that that was true was the second there's a scene in the film where there's a bunch of military dudes sitting around talking, and one of them is the actor Gary Chalk. Gary Chalk played Optimus Primal on Beast Wars. Yes, I know that for some reason, and yes, I recognize him. So when I see him, I'm like, this was shot in Canada. I know it immediately. The same was true when I watched Godzilla with Bryan Cranston. I was like, they shot that in Canada because he was in it. So you just always know. Good actor, nothing against him, but it just is, oh, okay, they shot this in Canada. Cool. So then you can tell that they didn't have much faith in it. Along with I mean, really, would you? And I didn't blame them for that, though. Would you have much faith in a Sonic the Hedgehog movie? You're Paramount. You're in a position of being in a dumpster fire. You need to cut costs everywhere. You're desperate. You're so desperate. You're thinking Sonic the Hedgehog. Fine, go with that. Hopefully, it works. So I was like, okay. So that's whatever. So the movie gets made, and then they released that first trailer, right? And the first trailer shows the version of Sonic, the CGI version of Sonic that they gave us, which was awful. Everyone hated it, like universally panned. Everyone was against it. This is a moment, though, in history to mark. Because when they did that, they made a decision, a different decision from everybody else. When a lot of these film companies come out and they put something out there like that, where, you know, I mean, the most obvious example is like 2016 Ghostbusters, when they put out like, hey, it looks like this. The film studio's response isn't, oh, we'll fix the movie. It's, you know what? You don't understand our vision, you stupid fans. You don't have to, we don't even need you. We're going to get other people. We don't need you. So they went out of their way to alienate fans. And that's an example that has been happening a lot with films lately. It even happened with Birds of Prey, which also flopped, by the way. So it's not like it's just one studio that does this. But in the case of this film, They got all the feedback about how much everybody hated the Sonic design, and they said, we're going to fix it. You hate it? We're going to fix it. They delayed the production of the film. It was originally supposed to come out in November of 2019, ends up coming out on Valentine's Day weekend of 2020. And that's a significant pushback. That is not a small thing. When a basically completed CGI live-action character is finished, to undo that and redo it with a completely new design is no small, task. So that cost them a lot of money to do that, but they did it. That decision came down to both the director of the film and Paramount. Sega probably had some influence in it, but from what I understand, Sega basically just, when they signed away the option, they had very little say as to what actually happens in the film or what ultimately the design is. So, interesting that the film studio made the correct decision. Now, because they did that, and because of the timing in which they released it on a big holiday weekend, along with, being President's Day and Valentine's Day, you had this moment where the film studio listened to us. They listened to our feedback. They took us seriously. They didn't say, you don't get our vision, nerds. This isn't for you. You're not welcome here, like every other major studio has been doing lately. And how were they rewarded for that? They're going on to be the highest grossing video game film of all time. It is fascinating. And I think this might have been one of those pivotal moments in like both film and video game history for something like that, because they really changed the mold. It is fascinating to me. But anyway, so the movie comes out and it's doing very well at the time I make this video. And so now, the moment you've been waiting for, I presume, what did I actually think of it? Well, when I saw the trailer, even the revised one with the new artwork, or the new CGI, which I thought was great, and you should support it, by the way, because if you were complaining about it, this is the time to reward them for the fact that they listened to your feedback by going out and buying a ticket. I'm just saying, vote with your wallet. And people are, which is good. But the film itself, when I saw that trailer, I thought, this is going to be, I've seen this movie. It's going to be, oh, look, the character who's CGI, who is too expensive to have him exist in the world we know him in, so hey, what do you know? He lives out in rural Canada for some reason, which is exactly what happened. They call it Montana, but it's Canada. He lives out there because, he got pulled into our world. Oops, that's weird. Oh, look, James Marsden's the lead. I'm pretty sure I saw this. It was called Enchanted, where he lived in a cartoony world, but that was too expensive to stay in, so they all went into New York because they had to be in our world. So I thought that was going to be our plot line. And then once he got there, we're going to have the buddy like, who are you? What are you? Oh! And then they have to go on an adventure together. And then one of them's like, look, man, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. And then you have the liar revealed story because one of them's like, I'll turn him in, man. I don't know what to do. And this is really freaking me out. And then they have the separation scene where they don't like each other. And then they make up and they come together to fight the bad guy, blah. Like cookie cutter, just kids movie garbage. And I was like, do we need that? And then you watch the trailer and you're thinking that's pretty much what it is. That's what you think. To my surprise, that was only some of it. So, okay. The movie in general, we'll talk about the generalizations first and then I'm going to go into more detail. But in general, does follow a lot of standard movie structure issues, tropes, if you will. And then there's some that are like film-breakingly stupid. But then there's also a lot of surprising ones. Ones where I was like, huh, you didn't do the stupid thing. There is no liar revealed story. There is no part where they end up hating each other and then they come back together. Like, they're kind of always on the same team, which is debatably dumb, but, you know. But in general, that kind of structure was like half of what it usually is. And I mean that in a good way, because I didn't want the full-on... I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that there wasn't some contrived conflict between our two main characters. You just had the characters being on one side and you had the villain on the other. So I like that. The villain is Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey makes this movie. Without him, this would not even be half the film that it is. Jim Carrey is at his absolute prime in this. He is the reason to see this above all else. Like, he's fantastic in it. Amazing. We'll talk more about that later, though. And in general, it was an entertaining film. It actually got a couple of laughs out of me, like legit laughs, not just chuckles. But it has obviously it has some structural issues. The first one was literally right off the bat. I hate, and I think Rick and Morty kind of said this best. I hate when stories show you something exciting in the intro, and you're like, okay, I guess this is where we're starting, and it's like, let me take you back a couple weeks to show you what was really happening. Start your stories at the beginning. Don't do the fake out thing. I don't like that. Anyway, so yeah, they did that thing, and then you're basically following along with Sonic. Well, we'll get into the details in a second, but didn't like that. Also, here's another sign of and I hate to say it, but it's another sign of a production that they just don't have much faith in, which is just really forced corporate tie-in. And I don't mean look, there's movies that they'll have faith in and they'll have corporate tie-ins with. That's normal. I'm fine with corporate tie-ins until it becomes kind of part of the plot. That's when I don't like it. For example, that Power Rangers movie a few years ago. The third act is just about get to the Krispy Kreme. It was ridiculous. It's mentioned so many times that it is literally a point of the story is the characters all have to go to Krispy Kreme. Hate that. This was nowhere near as bad, but it wasn't like Man of Steel. Man of Steel people give crap to all the time because they're like, oh look, he's fighting in an IHOP and now he's fighting against a 7-Eleven. That's just reality background. He didn't stop in the 7-Eleven in the middle of a fight and order some pancakes and say, the burgers are also really good too, IHOB. He didn't do anything like that. In Man of Steel. It was just backdrop. I'm fine with that. That's called reality. That's the world we live in. Stuff looks like that. But this movie, for the most, there were some certain jokes about things like, oh, I can't believe they're going to start shipping packages on Amazon with this. But I took that as a joke. You don't see a bunch of Amazon logos in your face unless I missed it. But the one that I really didn't like was the Olive Garden stuff. Oh my God. There's this part where James Marsden's sitting there with his phone and he's talking to his wife. And she's, he's talking about the dating apps or something like that. And then he's like, I don't have any special apps on my phone except for Olive Garden. Why do you have Olive Garden? Because unlimited breadsticks, and because when you're there, you're family. I'm like, it wasn't funny. That was just so on the nose that it punched your nose and you started bleeding. That was terrible. And I was like, okay, that was awful. That really hurt. But it gets worse later when I think they mentioned breadsticks a couple times later, and then at the end of the film, spoilers again, the government decides to reward James Marsden's character with a gift card to Olive Garden. Shows the logo, all this stuff. I'm like, don't do plot-centric things with corporate tie-ins. They're always stupid. But that's, again, another sign of a production that people don't have much faith in. Is they shoot them up in Canada, and they usually get corporate tie-ins, but they get odd corporate tie-ins, low-bid corporate tie-ins. Do you really think Krispy Kreme paid all that much for the entire third act of Power Rangers? Probably not. But they were probably the only bidder, and so people were like, fine, that's a check. That will reduce the probability of our failure. We'll take it. So we'll ruin our movie for it. This is not ruining the entire film, but I bet you, how much did Olive Garden really pay for that? Let's keep it real. But it just reduced the risk and maybe paid for Jim Carrey's salary for a day or something. That's what that is, and it's annoying. Fine. Okay. Those types of things annoyed me, but let's talk about the overall story here, and then I'll get to the moment that really killed it for me. But, okay. The film starts, like I said, with and then, 3 weeks later, 3 weeks earlier, whatever. You have this scene of Sonic as a younger Sonic, kind of the one we know him from the Genesis era, and he's like narrating and he's showing us, you know, his world that we know familiar from the video games, which is meant there for that purpose. So it's like, okay, this is legit. We see all that, and then they introduce us to this owl character, which I am not familiar with. I admit freely, I don't know who that is, and maybe that character showed up in later games. I honestly don't know. I admit ignorance on that. But she's like his guardian, and she's giving him a lot of exposition. Like, look, you have a super special power. No one else has this. It's weird. You have to keep it a secret, because if you ever don't, you know, there's going to be people who get you. And then like 5 seconds later, all of Knuckles' people come and get him. Which I thought that was interesting foreshadowing. I was pretty sure when I saw that those characters would not come up again in the movie, but they looked like bait for future films. Now, if you played Sonic games, those characters are straight from Sonic Adventure 1. They're like Tikal and Knuckles' people when they were more like tribal, and they built like pyramids, and they like, you know, they had all these Chaos Emeralds, and they were trying to like do stuff. And that to me was, that's what they're going for. And Knuckles ends up being like the last of their kind eventually, and he's tasked with like guarding the Master Emerald. I feel like they're maybe kind of going for that eventually. So they sowed the seeds of that, basically, which is fine. You can plant it. It's good film structure to plant seeds. That is a good thing. So they established that, like, look, these guys are going to get you. You have these magic rings, the rings right here. Unlike the video games where they're just arbitrary, here, or basically arbitrary, here they have like a specific function, kind of like they did at the end when you would get 50 rings and you would jump into that big thing at the end where it would teleport you into like that dimension. They took that to like a plot function. So he can throw out a ring and think about any place he wants to go, and then he can jump through the ring. The ring evaporates, and then he's in that location. So it's a teleportation device. So they are like, okay, we're going to send you to this other place, which was, of course, be Earth, and because they have to do that for budgetary reasons, is just how it is. They send him there, cool, whatever, and that's basically where our movie gets started. Now, I didn't think much of that other than just basic plot device to get him to our world, and I kind of accepted it because I got past that point a long time ago when I saw the trailer. I knew that was going to be our movie. So we get him into that location. He's a younger Sonic, and he's just kind of told, like, you have to hide. So he does. For years, he just hides out, and he builds himself a little house, like a cave type of thing, and he narrates a lot of what's going on. He introduces us to these other characters by saying, oh, this is such and such, and this is Donut Lord, which would be what he calls James Marsden's character. He's a local cop in the small town who's bored out of his mind. He calls him Donut Lord because the guy's so bored that he dresses up donuts and yells at them. You know, like, that's what he does. He's just a small town cop with nothing to do. So let's talk about his character very briefly, because frankly, he doesn't have much of one. He is basically an already completed character. He doesn't really want or need much in the entire film. He's kind of like, he's already married. He's already got a daughter. He's got a sister-in-law who hates him. But his only real goal in the film is like, I want to go be a cop in a real place like San Francisco. That's where I want to go. I don't want to stay in a small town. But his wife is like, whatever you want to do, I'm fine with. His daughter's like, whatever you want to do, I'm fine with. They're not suffering from, like financial problems. They don't really have issues. It's just, I want to do this instead of what I'm doing. That's his conflict. And by the end of it, because of Sonic, he's just like, I'll stay in the small town. I'm fine with what I've got. Like, that's his whole arc, is just he kind of changes his mind on something. Because he's a plot device. I love James Marsden, but his character is just a plot device to move Sonic along and have something for Sonic to bounce off of. Which is whatever. Sonic's thing is, he's very lonely, and he's just on the run, but he finally reaches a point where there's this part where he's like playing baseball against himself. The idea is, oh, he's so fast, he can play every single position and still play a game, right? So he's doing that, and then he kind of gets like upset with the fact that he just did this amazing thing, and there's no one who knows him, there's nobody to celebrate him, except for this guy in town, I think his name's Crazy Carl, and I like this, he had a reference, he's like, oh, I know what he looks like, and he pulls up a picture, and it's Sonic, which was, I thought, funny. They made fun of themselves there. So that's a thing. Speaking of which, there were a lot of video game references in this film that I liked. So aside here, the Sega Saturn logo appeared on a piece of paper, or something very similar to it. The intro logo, the Sega film intro logo, which a lot of people are saying is like the Marvel logo, where it shows a whole bunch of stuff. I think that's reading a little too much into it, but at the same time, it was cool to see all those logos up there. Shenmue is featured in there, and specifically Shenhua. If you look as the logo is first pulling out, you'll look up to the left. There's like an orangish box, and that's Shenhua doing this head turn move that she does at the end of Shenmue 1's initial like clip. So that was cool to see on film. Shenmue, what up? But anyway, So there's stuff like that, and at the end of the film, he has this like new house that he lives in. He lives in James Marsden's house, and they show like all this stuff. And there's a lot of video game references to him. Like his car is his bed is a race car. It happens to be the same car he drives in like Sonic and Sega All Stars Racing and stuff like that. So there's a lot of little references throughout that I thought were nice. It's funny enough, there is not, as far as I noticed, not a single time an actual video game or video game console ever appears on screen. Not even like in a background, at least that I noticed. There's never a moment where because this could have been cringe, where Sonic's like running around trying everything in the house and he just picks up a controller. It's like, oh, an old Genesis controller or something. Like there was nothing like that. Maybe because they tried it and it was cringe. I don't know. Either way, I didn't see that anywhere. But doesn't matter. So yeah, Sonic does the whole baseball thing, right? And he supercharges possibly for the first time, and this power surge comes out of him. Now the power surge knocks out power everywhere. Okay, now this is an interesting moment in the film because it's meant to get the whole world's attention. Like, hey, something weird just happened. It gets the plot going because what the first act did, or what the first section leading up to that, was just establish all our characters, their wants, their needs, their hopes, their dreams, whatever, who they are and all that stuff. And then this is the part where it's like, okay, now we got to get the plot going. What's the conflict going to be? So he knocks all this power stuff out, and the power surge is so intense, it goes into space and knocks out satellites. Now, what they don't mention, certainly, is that if it was that much of an EMP, it would have taken down a whole lot of aircraft. Sonic just killed a lot of people. I'm just going to put that out there. Now, they don't say that, but let's keep it real. If he's knocking out satellites with an EMP, there's a lot of dead people from aircraft. Especially over the United States. Come on. Like, there's a lot of dead people there. Sorry. But that surge is so powerful, the U.S. government obviously gets wind of it in a very stereotypical, like, we're the government military scene. Like, again, it's for a kids' movie, I get that. And that's, again, where Gary Chalk is. So, Canadian, right on. And they talk about, like, what they need to do, and they're like, we need to get this one guy, he's insane. They're like, oh, not him. Yes, him. Okay, fine. And they get Robotnik, which is, of course, Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey, like I said, fantastic in this role. And Jim Carrey's goal, this is where it gets a little weird, because we know him as the villain from video games, and we know he's a jerk in the movie, but his goals are aligned with logic. A terrorist, essentially, if you think about it, just knocked out a power grid throughout the entire United States, destroyed satellite infrastructure, and they don't say it, but he definitely killed a lot of people when he did that. And his goal is like, okay, I work for the U.S. government, and I was tasked with figuring out what happened. He does exactly that. And then he finds out it's this blue hedgehog alien, which they call Sonic an alien. I guess that's just what he is now, which makes sense, I guess. So when he first sees him, he freaks out because he's like, I'm not expecting that. No one would, you know? So Robotnik's goals are not out of hatred. He's just kind of a jerk, but he is aligned essentially with the positive, which was catch the terrorist activity. Now, does he go off the deep end? Yes. But I don't know. I mean, by the end of the film, you can think, how many people did Robotnik kill? Probably 0. How many did Sonic kill? Immeasurable. Just going to put it out there that if you're complaining about Man of Steel and like Superman knocking over buildings and how many people must have died, like, Sonic killed a lot of people. They just don't mention it. But Robotnik probably didn't. It's weird. He's going to probably be on like those like articles you see where villains who didn't really do anything wrong, kind of like the Wicked Witch of the West or the bad guy from Up. You know, it's like he didn't really do it. He was just following orders. He was a jerk, sure, but he didn't really do anything wrong. Anyway, so he's trying to catch the terrorist threat as he perceives it. In fact, the entire government recognizes him as a terrorist threat, so much so that they even call James Marsden one for associating with him. Basically what happens is Sonic hides out in James Marsden's house. James Marsden catches him, shoots him in the leg, knocking him out. But in the process, he drops all of his rings, which gets sent to San Francisco at the top of the tallest building in San Francisco, which is the name I forget. But it's the most iconic building in San Francisco, save for the Golden Gate Bridge, which is not a building. But yeah, they're like, oh, they're just sitting there on the roof. Okay, so now we know the plot. We have MacGuffin plot. He has to go and get the thing, which is traditional in a video game, I guess. Ironically, not usually in a Sonic game. But anyway, so he has to go there and do that. That's going to be the story. And so then they have their like, whoa, who are you? Well, who are you moment. Like, we knew that was coming. And they figure each other out. And then James Marsden's like, okay, fine, I'll help you. And then they have a scene with Robotnik, as I just mentioned. And then this is the moment where James Marsden decides, I'm going to throw away my entire career and everything I've been building towards to actively help an alien for some reason. Guess he was, an alien do something. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And there's this moment, we'll get back to it, but so then, there's the scene where Robotnik's like chasing after him and all that stuff, and you just kind of go like, presenting this situation from a different angle. Robotnik's the good guy and Sonic's the bad guy. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm just going to say it. It's true. But anyway, so the two of them are driving off in this car, and he's like, I got to get to San Francisco. I don't know how to get there. This is basically the moment that broke the movie for me. Because James Marsden pulls over, and he's like, okay, get out. San Francisco's west, just run there. You're the fastest thing ever. Which is true. That's a logical fallacy within the film. They point out the problem. This is where video game logic impacts with film logic, and they don't mesh. Because you have to start contriving reasons for the character to not immediately solve his problem. His problem is that a physical thing that he wants, and easily is attainable, is just a little further away than his current position. That's his problem. As a character, we've established he can essentially run at light speed. He can get anywhere as quickly as he wants. That's not really a conflict then. So how do you prevent the character from getting to his goal when his whole thing is, I can easily get to my goal? You have to contrive it. And they do. By saying, he just runs out of the car and he runs back and he's like wet and he's got a fish on his head. And he's like, I went out there and I ran into the ocean. I don't know where San Francisco is. That's it. That's their thing. He's like, I don't know how to get there. Which is terrible. Like, terrible. Because, what, he can't follow street signs? We see these parts in the film where he slows down time like Quicksilver does for the X-Men, where he's able to manipulate everything he does. He can't find a functional GPS. He can't find a map. He can't find street signs. Dude, just, like you said, just go west. You're going to see street signs that say San Francisco. Just keep following them, and then you're in one of the biggest cities in the world. It wouldn't have been difficult. And it's not even like it fell on some obscure building. It's the tallest building in San Francisco. The most iconic one. You'll find it. But he just says, I don't know how to get there. And the guy's like, James Marsden's like, fine, I'll help you. Now, one could argue that Sonic was just being difficult about this because he's like, I want a friend, and that's really why I'm acting like I can't get there. But that's just an excuse for bad writing. I'm sorry. But that's what that is. But then there's this moment where James Marsden's like, okay, fine, I'll help you because it's kind of my fault that you're in this situation. No, it's not. It is not James Marsden's fault that Sonic's in that situation. It's Sonic's fault that Sonic's in that situation. His whole life has been stay secretive, never do this special thing, it will attract attention and people will come to find you. So what does he do? He does this special thing, attracts a bunch of attention, and people come to find him. He set off all the events that led to his current predicament. That is his fault. It's not James Marsden's fault. And Sonic also, by the way, chose not to escape when he had the chance. He's in his little cave, right? He can throw out the ring and go there. He's like, oh, they're right here. I guess I can't go. Why? Just throw the ring. You're underground. They're not in the room with you. Once you go through, it's over. That's another contrived excuse to get him to a different location where plot can happen. That kind of stuff sucks. But it is what it is. It's a video game movie and it's a kid's movie. Anyway, so he's like, okay, fine. Then they have their little buddy cop adventure, and they do their road movie, and they get to their first major stop, which is like this, bar, and he's like, but why are you doing that? Well, because I want to do it. And you have like dumb conflict like that. I don't like stuff like that. It's contrived, and it's just an excuse to have jokes. It doesn't advance anything. We don't, other than they're like, oh, we'll give you a bucket list, which he does almost all of in the exact same scene. All you learn from that really is that he's looking for a friend, which was very Casper the Ghost-ish, and is probably not the best way to go about doing it. And then you have like just an excuse to have weird scenes where he's running around fast, so we can see more of that Quicksilver type of stuff. Okay, fine. Again, kids' movie, so you start to give certain things a pass. You get the hotel sequence, which is fine. It's just more of the same. But in that scene, one thing you actually do learn is like James Marsden is now one of the most wanted men in the world. His whole career is over. He's like, how am I going to be a cop? My whole career is destroyed. Which never really comes back up, because later in the film he's still talking about like, yeah, I got accepted to San Francisco. I'm just going to go be a cop there. And then Sonic's like, why do you want to be a cop there when everybody in the town needs you? Blah, blah. It's like, dude, right now you got to worry about not going to prison for the rest of your life. You're aiding and abetting a terrorist who killed a lot of people, whether he even realizes it or not. Just saying. Then there's this cool chase sequence where like one of Robotnik's cars comes out, and there's like that was actually neat because it really reminded me of the actual games, like where Robotnik would have some big vehicle, and then Sonic would destroy a layer of it, and then it changed, and he had to destroy another layer and another layer, and that was cool. So stuff like that was good. They eventually get to San Francisco, and you get another point of, well, okay, so there's a whole bunch of stuff where he like goes to his sister-in-law's house where his wife is, and he's like, okay, you're a veterinarian, he's injured, blah, 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 you know, like, help him. He's like, I don't even know what to look for here. But it's like, okay, we'll give him smelling salts. Oh, and the little girl gives him his new shoes. Like, okay, cool. You got a lot of that stuff out of the way to establish relationships and friendships, which is, again, Sonic's goal, I guess. So you do all that kind of stuff because you got to do it. But then you get to a point where it's like, okay, that's just a bunch of jokes, whatever, they're fine. Then you move on to like, okay, now we need to resolve this. He needs to go get the rings. But while he's been doing that, Robotnik actually found a quill earlier in the film that James Marsden had found of Sonic. There's no explanation for why Sonic's quill is just randomly in the forest. He just left it there. I guess he sheds. And if he sheds, that introduces new possible problems because it means he's done it a lot. There was no scene of like him plucking one out for some reason, as if this is a rare, unique situation. He just dropped one somewhere. And so Dr. Robotnik eventually finds it, harnesses it, and thinks like, oh, this is an energy source. I can do whatever I want with this. And that's how he's like, suddenly upgrading all his tech. While he's in the process of doing that, Sonic gets to San Francisco, and they see the building. And they again run into the writer's problem of like, okay, Sonic can run super fast and get anywhere he needs to immediately. What's stopping him from just running up there, taking it, and the movie being over? So they actually show that. He just runs up there and runs back. He's like, I can't. There's a locked door. And I'm thinking like, contrived 101, because we just established he's so intense he can knock down an entire tank, but he can't open a door. That was like Signs level annoying. But again, you have to do that or you don't have a movie, and that's the truth with most of these problems is video game logic does not function in film logic, because if you bring logic into it, you don't have a movie. It says a lot. But anyway, so he runs up, they eventually go up there, they do this contrived thing where they like put him in a bag, and they make jokes about him being a kid they took or something. It was weird. It was cool, it was just weird. And then they get up there and he just gets the rings. He's like, okay, I guess I'm good, I guess I'm done. And then out of nowhere, Robotnik shows up. And there's this cool, like, again, fight sequence between Sonic and Robotnik, and then you find out, like, Sonic's always been like, I'm so fast, nothing can touch me. But now that Robotnik has one of his quills, he's at the same speed, or his vehicle's at the same speed, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. It kind of makes me think in Sonic 2, the video game, that Robotnik actually had one, and that's why he was able to outrun Sonic at the end of the, Death Egg Zone. Reference. But anyway, so yeah, there's they have this big fight scene, and they're chasing each other, and they're going through rings and stuff, and they're going all over the world. And then, of course, we got the scene that I knew would be there, a sequence in China, because you have to do that now in order to get a movie into China. It's like, they're running across the Great Wall. Check that off the list. But then there's the end sequence where, you get the villain is a bad guy because, this little guy had more humanity than you'll ever have. Blah, blah, blah. Just tropes. Sonic goes all Super Saiyan on him, and then he fights him, and he knocks him into the ring. Now, this was interesting because, I didn't mention this, I don't think, but they establish early on Sonic's escape place. When he throws the ring, he's like, there's this mushroom planet. There's nothing in there but mushrooms. I hate mushrooms. And I thought the first time they did that, I thought, wow, that's like a jab at Mario, I think. Which would make sense. Sonic and Mario have a rivalry. I was like, that would make sense. It's just a funny gag. But then it became like, no, that's the actual end game. Is it's supposed to be bad to go to a mushroom planet. It's just where he would have to go. And so they bring it up multiple times. So it was no longer just like a joke. It was like, oh, that's actually the end game. He ends up knocking Robotnik into the mushroom planet, and then, Robotnik's like stuck there. At least that's how it's presented. The movie essentially ends with, like, okay, I'm just going to live with you guys now in your house, and you'll be my friends and my family. I got what I wanted. You got not what you wanted, James Marsden, because you wanted to feel bigger and more significant, live in another town, but I guess you learned the lesson that, you live in a small town and you are big and significant in that town. It's cookie cutter, but fine. And then they realized they had a problem with, like, both of these characters are, like, wanted by the U.S. government, blah, 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 blah. Nothing has changed. You realize that? Nothing has changed. All you did was kill the government agent, or at least from their perspective, kill the government agent that was sent to find you. That does not make you the hero. Olive Garden. Then that's kind of thrown in our face. They just kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to resolve all the conflict. It's fine. We realized Robotnik was a bad guy, I guess. even though from our perspective, you killed him. But here's a gift to Olive Garden, and you're no longer a federal criminal. Like, that made no sense. It's just that you have to do that for the movie to wrap up. So I really, really hated that. But anyway, so everybody's got their little happy ending. And then you get a couple of end credit scenes. One specifically of Robotnik on the Mushroom Planet, which was cool because he actually looked a lot like, traditional Robotnik minus the obesity, which they might have been implying will happen because all he's going to do is eat these mushrooms, and maybe they're really fatty mushrooms. Who knows? And then you have this scene where Tails comes out, and he's like, oh, where is he? He's never mentioned by name, which was kind of interesting. At least I don't think he was. And I remember coming out of the theater and being like, there was a little kid in the theater who was just like, Tails! And I was surprised by that. Like, legit surprised. Because I didn't think kids these days knew who Sonic, especially the extended Sonic characters were. But color me surprised, they did. So that was kind of cool. Overall, the movie is a really good video game movie. And it feels like a legitimate film. It's just not a great legitimate film. It's, like I said, it's very cookie cutter in its process. It does certain things that surprise me because of simply what it didn't do. The visual effects on Sonic were, I'm not going to say realistic, but I accepted them. Jim Carrey makes the film. Without him, you don't have a movie. It is a functional film definitely for kids and fans. It is acceptable because of the low bar of video games, but I do feel like down the line it will be perceived as a film that really wasn't very good, and it was popular for some reason when it came out. However, on the plus side, I didn't hate it. Don't get the wrong impression. I actually enjoyed the movie. It's just that it's not amazing, but it's what it needed to be at the moment in time it was released. And I do feel that I remember sitting there. And the moment that Sonic threw out that first ring and he was talking about the Mushroom Planet, when I initially thought it was a reference to Mario, I thought, oh my God. They just, without maybe realizing it or not realizing it, they just set up the capacity to have a video game universe of films. Not only Sega IPs, which of course they're free to do potentially if Sega's on board, which I don't see why they wouldn't be, but Mario, other characters. You could eventually, if this is successful enough, you could eventually see things like a Smash Brothers movie. Now, Universal Studios is actually working on a Super Mario Brothers movie, although I think it's a CGI film. But, that said, if you have this device, this plot device that allows you to freely go through dimensions like that, you have the capacity to tell these individual stories that do not hurt each other's worlds, and then bring them together for some reason of your choosing. Whether it's contrived or not, you can do that. One of the big flaws that the Avengers have always had is if all these heroes exist, you reach a point where it's like, how can Iron Man alone have a conflict when the rest of the Avengers are around? Like, why aren't they helping him? Especially like Iron Man 3. It's like, why aren't the Avengers around? Like, this isn't like a bank robbery he's handling by himself. This is the President of the United States was captured and Air Force One was destroyed. But Thor's got stuff to do. Hulk's got stuff to do. Some of those actually do, never mind. Doesn't matter. That's not the point of this. But that's the problem with cinematic universes is you start to have those issues. You accidentally came up with a great way to get around it. But one flaw they'll run into, which always happens, is your movie has to almost always take place on Earth. And if that's the case, you start creating that same situation again. But if you do enough separate movies, who's to say these things don't jump through time? I don't know. But they definitely jump through worlds. So it's interesting the potential you have there. And yeah, they definitely set up for sequels because they throw Tails at you. They throw what happened to Robotnik. They throw all that, Knuckles as people stuff at you. So there's definitely within Sonic itself another universe of events that can continue. And here's the thing, like I said, this movie is doing extremely well. Like way, way better than people thought. So the film had a stated budget of about $95 million initially. But there's more money added to that because of how much they had to redo the CGI. That's just what they'll admit to. So it's probably a lot higher. It was probably somewhere around, maybe like 120. But then you essentially have to double for marketing efforts. So I'll double off of the initial budget, which was, again, $95 million. So let's say the budget was roughly $200 million for the film. Okay, that's generally how these things work. Now, at the time I make this video, the film has just come out, and it's already grossed about $100 million worldwide. So the general consensus is when you see, $95 million budget, and it's made $100 million, it's already made $5 million profit. That is not how that works. Like I said, it's really more like a $200 million spent to create the film and promote the film. And then you brought in 100, which is great, but you brought in 100 minus, and then you have to subtract theater fees, which is typically about half, depending on the country. In some countries, like China, it's much worse. You get like 25% of it. So they've really brought in closer to like 50 million. Now, when you're saying I spent 200 million and I've only got 50 million, that sounds awful, but at the same time, this is the opening weekend and it's tracking and doing better than was expected. So eventually it will supersede that, and then of course, because it's a successful film, it will do well on home video, whether it's DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, etc. It is going to be a profitable film unless it just completely falls off for some reason after the weekend, but that's highly unlikely. So that said, we have established now that we might have the first viable video game universe of films ever. And I don't mean movies, like even House of the Dead here did have a sequel. There is a House of the Dead 2 based on this exact same thing. I ain't calling that a video game universe of films. But this one is where it can expand and actually go forward and be taken seriously. Previous attempts have not really worked out in any real way. Even Uwe Boll didn't want to do the House of the Dead sequel. That should tell you a lot. Now, there will definitely be a Sonic 2 film. I'm calling it. Like, there's no way they won't do that. It made too much money. It's doing too well. It's too easy. And they solved Paramount's problem. Paramount needed a hit. They needed a franchise where they can say, yes, that's our thing. So now, not only is Sonic their thing, they could be the guys who accidentally stumbled across making a video game universe of films, which kind of blows my mind, because that opportunity was right there for Sony. Like, it was staring them in the face. They run PlayStation. They run a film studio. They didn't think to put it together. And at the same time, even Warner Brothers was in a great position to do that. They own a developer. They also absorbed Machinima. So they had a lot of film and video game people just kind of sitting around. They're not doing anything with it. They're doing a little bit of like Mortal Kombat stuff, but that's about it. So we'll see how this plays out. But I think it's also interesting for Sega too, because they have a ton of IPs. I mean, a ton of them that you could turn into film properties. You know, this might start a boom, kind of the way after X-Men hit. Like, film studios were going after every comic book IP they could get their hands on. We might start seeing a rush for video game IPs. It might be a little too soon. I think they might look at Sonic as like, it's a one-off. It was really just an okay movie. It did well, but I mean, this isn't like Avatar numbers or anything. But it could be the time, guys. We could be about there. This could be the dawn of a new day in cinema and video games. And Sega's got a ton of IPs that I would love to see treated a tad better. That's all I'm saying. So that's it for my review, the history of all this, and the hopeful projections for the future. I know this was an incredibly long video, but now maybe you see why I don't always talk a whole lot about film, because I really want to break that stuff down. I used to do a movie review show called Bad Movie Theater, actually. Anywho, doesn't matter. Thank you very much for watching. If you guys could please like, comment, subscribe, check out all the stuff in the social media, you know, Instagram, Twitter, Patreon, all that stuff. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.